Welcome to You Can't Make This Up, Boss Level Stories, the show where real life workplace chaos meets real world career and leadership wisdom. I'm your host, Charles Smith, leadership coach, military veteran, corporate storyteller, and someone who has seen the type of workplace absurdity that I probably would not have believed if I had not seen it for myself. This is the official podcast of Charles Smith Leadership Coaching, LLC. For more information on the services I provide, please visit my website at www.csmithleadercoach.com. Today's episode is Boom! Someone is always watching. We live in a world where, whether or not you want to be, you are constantly being watched. You're being watched when you go in stores. If you're in a neighborhood where your neighbors have cameras that watch their houses, you may be inadvertently watched as you're driving by or whatever the case may be. You're being watched wherever you go. All of us are being watched. Now, that is an invasion of privacy to some degree because nobody really wants to be watched all the time. But it's not all bad. There are a lot of injustices that have been seen that if somebody wasn't watching, that injustice would have been gone unpunished. There are other situations where because there was a camera somewhere and something was being watched, maybe a crime was solved or something happened to where a problem got solved because somebody was watching or a camera was watching and saw something that somebody else normally wouldn't have been able to see. So the fact that we're always being watched, while there is some inconveniences to that, in some ways it's also not bad. Now, as leaders, we are being watched in ways that we don't even understand. In my 20 years of leadership, and especially the past few years as I've led larger and larger groups, I've noticed how much people watch because they're trying to take cues from you as a leader on what to do, on what not to do, on how you respond to different things. And so one of the things about it is very important as a leader to have integrity, to be doing the right thing at all times. It does not mean perfection because nobody's perfect, but it means consistency. It means saying, you know what, generally speaking, I'm going to be doing the right thing. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to do the right thing to correct it. Because as a leader, you're being watched and that's what people expect. And so to give you an idea of how you're being watched and how you never know you're being watched, but why it's always important to do the right thing, I've got this story about what I call the exploding fire extinguisher. So I worked for a company that built thousands and thousands of fire extinguishers per day. And as a manufacturing engineer, this job was one of the best jobs I had because I got to design processes for building fire extinguishers. I got to design tooling. It was a really cool job because most of the stuff that I designed and got built didn't exist before I designed it and built it. And so it was looking at I got to work with engineering. I got to work with the shop floor to take products that were newly designed and figure out how to build them. And so one of these products was a huge fire extinguisher that went in the engine compartment of a huge dump truck. So if you've seen mining companies and they have these really large dump trucks that are like the size of a house. So the tires are like 10 or 12 feet. They're 10 or 12 feet tall and maybe 5 to 6 feet wide. Just really, really big pieces of equipment. Well, these engines are very large as well. And if an engine were to catch on fire, it could be very, very bad for that dump truck and the cargo they were carrying. And so one of the things that our sales and marketing department were trying to do at the time is they were trying to get into this market of building basically fire extinguishers that would go in the engine block of these big dump trucks. So they decided to say, okay, we're going to build this fire extinguisher, and it was huge. I want to say it had 250 pounds of fire extinguisher powder in it. Now, your average size fire extinguisher has about 5 pounds. Some of the larger ones, maybe in office buildings, are 10, and you get into industrial sites a little bit bigger. So this was a 250-pound fire extinguisher. And so one of the things I got to do was try to figure out a way of how to build these and try to do it as cheaply as possible, because we didn't have existing tooling to build it, but we had spaces where we built other large fire extinguishers that use a different agent. But the goal was, hey, if we can use an existing place that we already have, it'll save us a lot of money in trying to do this. So we found an area near where we would build clean agent, and basically we found an enclosure that we could put this big fire extinguisher in order to be able to fill it with powder and to pressurize and all those type things. So one of the things about pressurizing it is that I don't think that we had pressurized anything with that much powder that was that large. So myself and the production supervisor and the production lead were all on this test. And then our control booth was our controls engineer. And so he was monitoring how the system was reacting, how the pressurization was going, to kind of tell us what was happening. Because, we had never done this before. We really didn't know how long it was going to take. We really didn't know. And there are things that you can do to adjust the pressure, to maybe adjust the flow. Because the key is you don't want to pressurize it too fast, but you also don't want to pressurize it too slow as well. So we attached a transducer to one of the ports of our pressurization nozzle. And these transducers were ones that we used throughout the facility. And they were very good about giving us an idea of what the pressure was inside of the fire extinguisher. So as we figured out how to fill it and then figured out how to pressurize, we said, okay, we want to use one of these transducers because we know that they're trustworthy. We've used them before. And it should give us a good idea of what the pressure is inside of this fire extinguisher. So we filled one up with powder. We rolled it over to this enclosure. We attached it to all of our devices so that we could know what was going on. And then we began to pressurize it. And the goal was to get it pressurized to 350 pounds per square inch. So we start the process. And we're looking at the PSI. And it's obviously taken a while because, like for our 5-pound fire extinguishers, those took maybe about 10 seconds to pressurize. So this one was much larger than that. And so, and it was our first time doing it as well. So we kind of knew that it might go slower than normal. We kind of knew it wouldn't be as fast on the first run. But what we intended to do was get data to be able to see over time how it pressurized and what was going on and kind of go from there. So I'm looking at this gauge, and about 5 or 10 minutes in, we're at roughly about 170. So I'm like, okay, we have a little ways to go still. So I'm sitting there talking with the production supervisor and the production lead because at this point, there was not much for us to do. Their main job was to hook the fire extinguisher up. Mine was to observe that to make sure everything was properly hooked up and sealed the way it was. And then I also had a radio, and I was talking with the controls engineer that was in the observation room. So at 15 minutes in, we're at about 180 pounds per square inch. We've still got to get to 350. So we're sitting there talking about Alabama versus Auburn football because That's what we did at that job. And we're sitting there and discussing that. And I'm the whole time kind of peeking at the transducer and checking with the engineer in the booth to see if he's seeing the same thing. And it looked like it may have topped out for a second. And we had a plan for that as far as, hey, if it seems where it kind of stalls out, we'll do A, B, C, and D and kind of go from there. So then it finally gets up to about 200. And we're still talking about football. And all of a sudden was this tremendous boom. Not a boom, not a boom, but a boom. And the only way that I can describe it, I have heard a sonic boom from the space shuttle. I've shot and heard loud rifles. I actually, during a training exercise one time, saw an M1 Abram fire around. All of those are very loud. But all of those are very loud and short. So it's boom. This boom felt like it lasted about 5 or 6 seconds. And it was so loud that it startled me that I immediately raised my hands up to grab by my ears. And I look, and there is powder that is flowing all out of this enclosure where the fire extinguisher was. I turned to look at the two ladies I was with, and they were running. They had already taken off running. They were gone. And I realized, you know what? Normally, I'm not affected by peer pressure or following the crowd, but I should probably run too. So I started running. And this noise is just deafening, and there's a cloud of powder now chasing me. So when it's all done, everybody's calling me on the radio. I hear over the loudspeaker, hey, see what was going on, that kind of thing. So fortunately, everybody was safe. Nobody was hurt. They did have to shut down shipping for that day because where the explosion happened, for lack of a better term, it spread powder probably over a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot space. And that included the floor, that included other apparatuses, that included shipping racks, where we had fire extinguishers that were ready to go. So all of those had to be cleaned and the powder collected, that kind of thing. I was kind of shook because the noise was loud. I didn't realize until maybe later on that day how dangerous it was. And it was so good that we had a situation where we had that enclosure that kept us safe from the powder blowing out. So we investigated, and what we figured out was that the transducer had failed. And although it said, I think it was 200 PSI on the transducer, it was actually closer to 700. And we know that because there was a burst disc in that fire extinguisher. And what the burst disc does is if the pressure inside tries to exceed what the structural pressure is of the fire extinguisher body, it will release pressure, because if not, the thing will blow up and become like a big hand grenade and sending shrapnel everywhere. So we understood what happened. And although it was scary, it's like, okay, well, this was a failure of the transducer, not a failure of the fire extinguisher. And so we got to figure out how to maybe put it better or where to put it to where that won't happen anymore. So I was relieved that nobody got hurt. I was also very relieved that it wasn't anything more serious than just a transducer failure, because that happens, and unfortunately happened on that one. The next day, I'm going to another meeting and hadn't forgotten about the situation yet, but of course my mind's going to other things. And I run into one of the IT guys, and he says, "Hey Charles, how you doing, man?" "Well, I'm doing good." "Hey, how you doing?" "Good." "Man, you're fast." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm fast?" "Do the video." "What video?" "Thought of one of you running from the fire extinguisher when it was blowing up." I'm like, "Oh, there's a video." "Well, who has the video?" "Hey, it's we have it in IT. Go check it out." "Well, I think I will." So I go find the IT guys. I'm like, "Hey, I heard there's a video," and they showed this video. And only because nobody got hurt, and only because we knew right away what was going on. This had to be one of the funniest videos I've ever seen in my life. It showed the three of us that were at this test station sitting there talking and chilling, and when it showed the powder beginning to spew, it showed the ladies running, me standing there being in shock, then seeing them running, and then me running and catching up with them and passing them because I didn't want to be drowned out by a fire extinguisher. There were people in other parts of the area that you could see them looking and kind of figuring out what to do. Some of them ran one way, some ran the other. It was just funny to see how everything was happening. And it because nobody got hurt and because it was a very, very, very funny situation. But it reminded me that, hey, because I had no idea that there were cameras in that area. I had no idea that they had cameras there, and part of it was security, but part of it was safety as well. And that footage did help us to understand what had happened and how to make it not happen in the future. But it was a reminder to me that we're always being watched, and as leaders, we're definitely being watched. And so, one of the things that's important is, as I mentioned earlier, integrity. Now, if you're in the Air Force, if you've been in the Air Force Reserves, they, you know that integrity is one of the three Air Force core values. And what it's defined as in the Air Force is basically doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. And so, what is so important is that as leaders, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, whether you like it or not, we are always being watched. We are always being watched by somebody. And so it's very important to always have integrity because you never know who's watching. You never know what they're seeing, and you never know how what they're seeing is going to have an impact on the other person. So there are three things that are very, very important, three elements that I would describe of having integrity. Okay. Number one is consistent performance. So nobody's perfect. But if you're consistent, then that is a big part of integrity. If you're consistently every day doing what you're supposed to be doing, regardless of who's there, regardless of who's not, if you are doing that, that is a key part of integrity. It's kind of like golf. If you're playing on a golf course and, you're going to hit some bad shots. But if you're consistently making good shots, you're going to have a pretty good score on that golf round. The next thing is it also so a part of integrity along with consistent performance, it's also gains trust from your subordinates. As somebody who has worked for many people and as somebody who has had many people work for me, one of the things I've noticed is the importance of integrity. A lot of people have a very bad view of leadership because they see leaders doing one thing or saying one thing and doing something else. They see some leaders as having a very much of a do as I say, not as I do type mindset. And it could be something that builds distrust. It could be something that makes it harder for a person because they see this leader not doing what they're supposed to be doing. When you have integrity and your subordinates see that, it's going to build trust. Because guess what? They know you're not perfect. They know you have issues. But if they see you every day doing your best, performing consistently, making sure that you're doing the right thing, not just for yourself, but even more than that, for the people around you, that's very, very, very important. Another benefit of it is grace when you make a mistake. And guess what? As a leader, you will make mistakes. But if you have a track record of integrity, people give you more grace. I am a person that, in my time as a leader, generally speaking, have treated people very, very well. There's only twice that I know that I maybe got kind of out of sorts with somebody. And in both of those situations, it was a person that was lying, a person that was not being truthful about what was going on. And I got frustrated. And I may have yelled and screamed. But the bottom line, and I'm not saying that's good, but it's something that I very rarely do. In fact, it was so funny because people that had known me for years, they were shocked to see me get as mad as I did, but they totally understood because of the people I was dealing with. But there was grace for that in that season for me. And what I mean is that when you are constantly having integrity, and when you're doing the right thing, and when you are trying to treat people right and all that kind of stuff, people will give you grace when you make mistakes. It is the people that try to go around all haughty, try to go around, I'm better than thou. Those are the ones that it's hard to give grace to, because they're going around, they're being arrogant, they're being all these things. But if you're somebody that has constant integrity, you're going to be able to get grace to unlike other people. So, as a leader, don't be afraid of always being watched. Even if it's not with cameras, you have eyes on you all the time because you're a leader. And teammates, trust me, as a leader, sometimes there have been people who have worked for me that were surprised that I knew certain stuff about them or knew what they were working on, and they were surprised because they never had a leader that actually paid attention to what they did. So, whether you're a leader, whether you're a team member, make sure that you're always doing the right thing, because guess what? Even when it seems like somebody is not looking, I guarantee you they are. Have a good one. Interested in premium content? Join our Leadership Lounge on Patreon. There, you will get weekly motivation videos, discussion posts on critical leadership topics, live session leadership discussions, and pre-recorded webinars, plus other bonus material and so much more. To join, please visit my Patreon page, patreon.com/Charles Smith Leadership Coaching, LLC.